In this video, we continue our exploration of tools that are included in the data collection and measurement plan. And we'll be specifically looking at creating measurement operational definitions. The learning objectives for this video will include who the intended audience is for a measurement operational definition. We'll then take a look at the elements that make up a good operational definition, and we'll end by practicing the concepts and work through a couple of examples for measurement operational definitions of process data. All right, I'm now pulling information from the Business Process Improvement Workbook. And before we take a look at how to build a measurement operational definition, or OPDEF, as I like to call them, I thought I would spend just a moment making sure that we answer the following questions. What are they? And who are they for? To help me out, I've grabbed the DMAIC summary sheet. I've just got the define and measure phases displayed right here. And here's the point at which we'll start to consider building operational definitions. And as I'm describing this, I think it'll get us to the what they are and who they're for. Your team has already completed all of the steps of the define phase. Part of the goal of the define phase in your tollgate review is to capture a sense of what's going on in current state for this poorly performing process. You've identified many stakeholders and interviewed a few of the most important, and you've also captured a whole bunch of qualitative data. You've taken that qualitative data and used it to help create critical to quality variables. These are variables that are affecting overall process performance. They're written in a format that could be measured, but in the define phase, you haven't yet gone out and measured them. Your team and yourself worked really hard to craft out these CTQs and prioritize them. And now in the measure phase, you're going to go out and want to get data on it. We build this data collection and measurement plan to help make sure that the information that we collect is as accurate as possible. So we're right here. Here's the thing. When we go out and get this data, frequently you and your team are not the ones that are actually doing the record keeping or the data collection. You may be asking others. You could be asking process workers to help you collect this. You could be asking other data analysts, folks inside or outside of the business. Heck, you might even be asking external suppliers or regulators or others to help collect this data. You want to make sure that they're all collecting it in a similar manner. We saw earlier how even simple things like cycle times and lead times are often misinterpreted by different groups, where lead time is for some groups just thought as the upfront time for raw materials to get to your loading dock door, not the total time in the system like we look at it. Cycle times could be in and out within an activity box, or they could be from the beginning of one activity to the beginning of the next activity. There's lots of confusion just around these terms, but then also each of these CTQs probably unique phenomena that not everybody is familiar with. Operational definitions, or OPDEFs, help to make sure that everybody understands the things to be measured, these CTQs. They also create some rules or pro tips or advice on how you go about collecting it. Operational definitions are not for your team. Your team already understands these CTQs, already understands these process performance variables and definitions. Heck, they went about the hard work of process mapping it and crafting the statements. OpDefs aren't for your team. Your team understands this perfectly well. It's for everybody else outside of the team so that they're all collecting the information in a similar manner. OpDefs, what are they? They are simple statements to help measurers and data collectors all collect the information in a similar way. And they're for everybody else outside of the team that's going to help you. Here's what I do when crafting operational definitions. I bring my team in the room. I list out the CTQs that we know we're going to go measure. And then with those CTQs listed, I'll say we need to craft a measurement OpDef for each one of these CTQs. It's only going to take the team 1 or 2 minutes to craft a CTQ. So let's say you got a handful of CTQs, 5 of them. This is like a 10-minute exercise then. And I remind teams the following. Operational definition should give us an understanding for each measurer. It should help us to understand the what it is that we're measuring, how we're going to measure it, and the boundaries for measure. There are some other things that you might want to consider in your operational definition, but it's those first 2 points for sure, the what and the how that I'm always got, boundaries, often, especially with time-based metrics. And then I may want to consider some of these other elements, like who's performing this measurement step? Who's to benefit from this, or whom are we measuring, and who is the owner or accountable for particular areas. Those are optional things. These, though, are the biggies. Now, frequently when I'm crafting a CTQ statement, I'm taking the literal CTQ and I am adding to the what maybe a picture, like an element of the process map. Or I may be briefly describing a use case or a scenario that involves a particular type of customer request. For the how piece, usually it's a description of the different tools that will be used or the way that the data will be collected or where you should store the collected data. And after I craft one of these operational definitions, I will try to have measurers, or at least 1 or 2 of the measurers, take a look at this OpDef to make sure that everybody's clear about what this thing is and how we're going to measure it. Boundaries are nice. I can show those up on the process map. They're especially important for time-based metrics because there's often such confusion over where is cycle time beginning and end of the activity, or where is lead time beginning to end of the full beginning to end of the of the entire process from the customer's perspective. Let's take a look now at practicing building some of these CTQs. So in your business process improvement workbook is a little worksheet page that in some of the in-person classes, I have class participants spend some time actually crafting out different OpDefs for these different types of phenomena. In separate videos, we talk about the type of data that is typically measured in process-driven work, whether it's continuous or discrete. For purposes of this exercise, I'm assuming that you have not yet seen or heard of those different types of data, so we'll ignore this section now. But know that frequently with my OpDefs, I'll have my teams also try to figure out the type of data that's to be used. There's an advantage we're going to find to continuous data, fewer amounts of data points, but for purposes of this piece, we'll just ignore this column. I encourage you now to stop the video, take a look at maybe not all of these, but definitely try practicing creating an operational definition for each one of these. A statement that if given to measurers, they would all measure the phenomena in a consistent manner. Okay, we're back. And my guess is that at first glance, pretty straightforward, but got a little tricky trying to make sure that if you gave the statement to just about anybody, every person would measure it the same way. I'm not going to do everyone, but let's take a look at the on-time flight departure next, and we'll try to craft an OpDef. Let me get some room. All right, let's walk through creating operational definition for on-time flight departure. First question I typically start with is, what is this thing that you're asking from different measurers? And it will probably relate to your original CTQ statement, but I want to remind team members that as they're crafting this, let's make sure that whatever is being measured has a perspective from the customer's point of view, it's often very easy to slip into the trap of thinking that we're just going to measure from our own internal process worker perspective or internal organizational perspective. We're trying to optimize these systems to help improve performance from our customer's perspective. And so I always kind of start with that framework. And here's where I'm going with this. When we're talking about on-time flight departure, it could be about getting bodies into the plane and getting the door shut, and comparing that to something that's in a flight log. So in this first example, I took a little bit of an organizational perspective. Maybe we compare the departure time in a flight log to when the doors are closed. But I think a better, more customer-centric view would be this is more customer centric and probably as a result a better representation of the data that we really want to collect, where we're taking a look at the departure time kiosk that's displayed at the airport terminal, and we're comparing that to when the wheels actually leave the ground. Okay, so there's the what. Now the how might be to have we could have the air traffic controller record this. Maybe though it's better to specify that the air traffic controller is actually taking care of making sure that the planes aren't crashing into each other. And instead we've got some sort of an intern assistant at the flight tower is responsible for collecting this information, and they're going to use the tower clock and a spreadsheet that the process improvement team used that has a listing of those departure time kiosk values, and they record what the actual time was. We've now described boundary conditions, but it might benefit to include some sort of a process map or an example in with this text-based description. But I think what we've just done is crafted out a statement that makes sure that if we were to pass this out to a variety of folks throughout the organization, maybe throughout multiple facilities or geographic regions, they'd all be collecting the data in a similar manner. And that's the goal of an operational definition. We're just trying to make sure that we get as accurate a data that really reflects current state as possible. And Measurement Optifs can help.